The following is an original production of AZPM News.
Coming up, the latest timeline surrounding the investigation into the alleged kidnapping of Nancy Guthrie. The world is laser focused on Tucson. How did we end up here? We've got two reporters who've been on the ground zero from when the case began. Plus, ballots have been mailed, and we're less than a month away from Election Day. We'll dig deeper into the RTA Next plan. I'm David Lee, and the press room starts now. Welcome to the press room. I'm AZPM News Director David Lee, and the search continues for Nancy Guthrie, the 84-year-old mother of Today Show host Savannah Guthrie. Joining me at the table, two of the folks who have been there since ground zero, LM Boyd and Katya Mendoza, both of AZPM. And LM, take us through how we ended up from there to here and where we're at right now as of this taping Thursday afternoon.
Yeah, so keep in mind that some of these details were learned days later, but to start from the beginning, the last time anyone saw Nancy Guthrie was Saturday night, January 31st. She had dinner with her family. Family dropped her off back at her home just before 10 p.m. And we know that early Sunday morning, February 1st, the camera on her doorbell disconnected. And a few other details have come forward. The Nest app alert detected movement that could have been a person or an animal. We later got footage of a masked person that we can talk about later. But we also know that 15 minutes after that app alert, her pacemaker disconnected from her phone. The next day around noon, family learned that she didn't show up where she was supposed to. They went to the house to check up on her. And shortly thereafter, they called 911, and at 12:15, Pima County Sheriff's Department shows up, and Sunday night, that's when it was announced that she was missing.
Okay. Katya, you have been with LM at a lot of these news conferences that have been held. Sheriff Chris Nanos taking the lead on all of this. How has it been at these news conferences? A lot of outside media are in town for this.
The media presence has definitely grown exponentially since day one of Nancy Guthrie's disappearance. There has been a large interest in terms of true crime reporters, influencers, national outlets, but also international. Just yesterday, I saw a couple of Australian reporters doing live stand-ups outside of the house.
Okay. LM, earlier in the week wasn't a lot going on until the FBI released some photos and video of an alleged suspect.
Yeah, we previously thought that the footage on the door camera was not recoverable. That is what Sheriff Nanos had said last week. But FBI and Pima County jointly released this footage. They said that they were able to recover this data on the back end, is how they phrased it. Yeah, those stills and video were released to ask the public for help in identifying them.
Katya, there's been a lot of social media tied to this particular case, and it's going not just from those who are covering it, but also the Guthries. They've released several things on Instagram.
Certainly. So these videos have been posted onto Savannah Guthrie's Instagram account. A couple of them, thanking the community for the outpour of prayers, thoughts, well wishes. Everyone just wants to bring Nancy home, but also a couple of cryptic messages, which, officials and the media have reported could be potentially addressing the alleged abductors. The Guthrie family has also, said that they will pay. This is very valuable to them. They just want to bring their mother home.
Okay. Any final thoughts from either of you guys as we go into now day 13 by the time this particular show airs?
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of public concern about the way this investigation has been handled. Those first couple days, there were a lot of statements made by the Sheriff's Department that had to be walked back or clarified. Even Sheriff Nanos has acknowledged that the crime scene was turned back over to the family too soon. Other people in the community have criticized the sheriff's department for not bringing in the FBI sooner or allowing the FBI to take the lead. And we'll just have to see where this investigation goes. In response to this criticism, Sheriff Nanos has called it Monday morning quarterbacking. But in this second week where we see, not any news conferences and the updates are more curated, this leaves a gap for people wanting to fill that with information. And I think because of the tragic nature of this case, people want answers. And unfortunately, a lot of people are going with premature answers because that information hasn't been as transparent as some want.
Okay, Ellen Boyd, Katya Mendoza, thank you so much for everything.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We are continuing our coverage of the Nancy Guthrie case. Joining me here at the table, Joe Ferguson of the Tucson Agenda. We have Tim Steller of the Arizona Daily Star, Paul Ingram from Tucson Sentinel, and of course AZPM's Nick Rommel. A lot has been going on. Paul, we'll start with you. Sheriff Chris Nanos was at the forefront at the beginning. He since kind of backed away from being the public face. Is that a strategic reason, or is the FBI just kind of taking over?
Well, they have a hard problem. I mean, they're in the midst of investigation. They don't know a lot. They don't want to start announcing things unless they have something. Mm-hmm. And of course, there's just a problem of like, if you hold a press conference, what are you going to talk about? They've been releasing as much information as they can. But yeah, I mean, Nanos isn't in the forefront because the investigation is really complex at this point. And I think in part, yeah, I mean, he had kind of kind of a painful press conference last week, and so I think in part they want to put a little bit of information out there, but not have a press conference that kind of really shows maybe how little they know about the case. Okay, Tim, you wrote a column a little bit earlier this week talking about the intense spotlight that is on Tucson and how it maybe has compared to other kind of national situations. How are we doing right now?
Well, I mean, it's a bad situation to be in. You don't want to have news trucks lining your streets. That means something terrible has happened and it's become a spectacle. And that has, it has not to this stage shown any signs of waning, which is, I don't know. On the one hand, being in the news business, I totally understand wanting to be on top of a big story that is a story that people are very curious about. On the other hand, I mean, some of this stuff is just ridiculous. Yeah. We hit the point of absurdity when I guess it was a listener of a podcaster or an influencer who ordered a pizza for somebody, for that influencer or podcaster to be delivered to the Nancy Guthrie home. And then the Domino's pizza driver took it up to the door. And that's kind of the level of absurdity we've reached.
I'll pose this to the table for anybody to answer. Have we gotten, I don't know, Nancy Guthrie fatigue? There's a lot of stuff you pointed out there that's you can look on social media left and right. But do you think folks are feeling a little fatigue with all of the coverage?
I mean, I think at this point there's a lot of running around. There was some, there was an investigation, a momentary detainment, and you see there was sort of like a rush of media down there. There was a rush of interest for that. It turned out to be not much. I think there probably for a while there's going to be a lot of interest in the story because you've got kind of a strange kidnapping apparently. You've got a celebrity attached to it. I mean, there's a lot here, so but at some point, yeah, I think as this goes on into another week or longer, hopefully not. Hopefully it was resolved in the best way possible. But this may go on, and then at some point, yeah, the national media may kind of find the next thing to go chase. Yeah.
Want to switch things up a little bit. The ballots for RTA Next, Propositions 418 and 419 have gone out. Early voting has begun. But still a lot of questions surrounding the whole project. One of those questions, public transit and how it looks overall in the new plan. Nick, I know you just got done doing some recent reporting on it. When you look at it and when you look at the plan, what are some of the concerns about public transit you see?
I think the critics of the plan, their main concern is that The plan mostly keeps in place the existing public transit infrastructure, and a lot of critics of that part of the plan say it could do more in terms of expanding transit, like the first RTA did. It helped create the streetcar, which is now one of the hallmarks of Tucson's infrastructure. So I'd say that's probably the main concern. And then there's also, on the concern side, critics of the plan will say that the overall funding structure for transit in Tucson is kind of unusual compared to a place like Phoenix that has its own transportation authority that's just for public transit, has its own governing board, own sales tax, all for buses and light rail. Tucson doesn't have that. So public transit is either funded through the RTA, where it's like this 20-year commitment that's basically apportioned by all these local mayors competing for funds, or it's out of the Tucson General Fund, out of the city budget every year, which is somewhat unusual. And it's almost, I think, 9 or 10% of the general fund, for example, this year is just for public transit, which is much higher than many other cities. So I'd say those are the concerns with that part of the plan.
Joe, there also seems to be a lot of concerns with the RTA plan when it comes to urban issues versus suburban versus rural. What are some of the concerns you see in the plan?
Well, I think there's a disagreement at the end of the day between urban residents and people who live outside there on whether the RTA is supposed to be a regional plan or a plan that helps them in their backyard. And so the concern we've heard over and over again from the city is that they're not getting their share of it. They put in this amount of money, they want that money back out. But, as a Tucsonan, I go to Marana, I go to Oro Valley, I go to Sarita, I've been to Arivaca a few times. And so I use those same roads that are being funded in part by the RTA. And so there's a push and pull of that. And people in Tucson don't want to build bridges in Marana. Okay. And so Marana desperately needs those bridges to continue to grow. And so there's that push and pull that's led to this compromise plan that largely focuses on, roadways and not transit, as we talked about.
Tim, according to some of your reporting, $2.67 billion is the overall number, but $177 million is being set aside for rehabilitation of arteries and collector roads. Is that enough to address the issues there?
Certainly not. Yeah, no. I mean, $177.6 million will go a distance. It'll fix some big roads, and again, we're talking about like Broadway, Oracle, those kinds of roads. Most of the money, almost $140 million, is dedicated to Tucson. The way to understand this, though, is that basically, speaking of the conflict Joe was talking about, the city of Tucson has a lot more interest in rehabilitating or repaving its roads than in widening them, whereas or building new intersections, that sort of thing, whereas the outlying suburbs have more interest in widening or building new roads, that sort of thing. So this was a way, A, to address the city's concern about repaving roads, and B, also to reapportion the money a little bit. That is to balance the spending within the plan so that the city gets a little more and South Tucson gets a little more, because the percentages were a little low for Tucson. So in the last minute wheeling and dealing, this is one way that the plan was balanced out.
Paul, if 418 and 419 do not pass, what's the future in terms of development moving forward?
That's a really good question. I mean, there's a pretty significant problem. There's a structural problem even for the city of dealing with like the cost of the bus system. They're facing a $40 million hole right now, so they have to figure out how to make up that gap alone. Without the RTA funding, that gets even worse. So everyone's going to have to decide what to do about their infrastructure. I mean, does everyone kind of go back to kind of doing their own kind of the pre-RTA compromise? And I think it's worth thinking about, like, RTA originally was a compromise. It was, nobody's entirely happy with this plan, but it's a good enough plan, right? And RTA Next is another compromise. So if you blow that up, what's the next step? I don't think actually anyone knows that. I mean, at some point, everyone's going to have to, Miranda's going to build its own bridges, and Tucson's going to build its own streetcar, and Sarita's going to lay out roads, or do some projects never get done because of that?
Nick, alternative transit is a big part of this, or at least a part of the plan. They want to try to do more things with bikes and pedestrian walk. Is there enough stuff in the plan right now to address those as well?
There is a lot in the plan in terms, I mean, if you look at the roadway element, like almost every road improvement, or maybe not almost every, but many road improvements include bike infrastructure, pedestrian infrastructure. And if you just look at the roads that are being done for the first RTA, even if they're not finished, like Grant, the parts that are finished, you see have been turned from these extremely car-centric roads to a more kind of multi-use road. So the plan does provide for that, I would say.
Go
One of the interesting things that opponents have talked about is they still think it's too car centric. But the thing that really jumped out at me, especially I was reading through that tome of a RTA publicity pamphlet, and the big theme in the opposition arguments is safety. That is, that even though it does deal with safety improvements to some extent, that it doesn't grapple with the problem. We've had an incredible surge of traffic deaths, not just pedestrians, but vehicles and bicycles and motorcycles as well. And it doesn't grapple adequately, and that I think also has to do with this alternative transportation thing, just trying to get people to go different ways so they don't get hurt in crashes.
Joe, we know the RTA wants this. There are a lot of folks who want this. Who's opposed to this, and what are they saying right now? As the ballots are out, and it's just a couple of weeks away before the vote is here.
So it's pedestrian advocates, socialists, and Republicans who are the largest groups to come out against this. It is a Tucson group, if you've ever seen one, that have their own competing concerns as to why it's not there. From it's too long, it's too much, it doesn't do the right thing. So there are complaints everywhere you look for it at the end of the day. So it's hard to pin down one, but I think the largest group I've seen has been the people who want something more different in there and want a public process.
It still seems like there's some question about flexibility, whether or not it's a full 20 years or whether or not, 5 years in, we could look at it and maybe make some adjustments. Is that a thing or no?
No. I mean, they have a list of projects that they have to do. Yeah. There's some money that's set aside for certain things like safety that they have some control to decide down the road. But those lists of enumerated projects, Catero Farms interchange is a $250 million project. Not all of it's going to be funded by the RTA, but It's a big project. And so they have to, again, finish it in 20 years if voters approve this. So I think the flexibility is fairly small at the end of the day.
Does anybody see any possibility of flexibility?
I mean, I think from our previous press room with this, my impression is that you got to take it back to the voters. Yeah. I mean, the big contrast was that they did change the Broadway plan early in RTA 1, and then later in RTA 1 basically decided that wasn't a legal maneuver that we had done, that kind of flexibility was not permitted. And so, I don't see anything that is locked in changing without a vote. It would have to go back to voters.
The one thing I'd say is that a couple parts of the plan might be flexible, I think, like the arterial and collector roads. It doesn't specify which ones, whether it's Broadway, Oracle, Campbell, whatever. And also, the projections for this plan are more pessimistic than the last plan, which means that they're budgeting in some potential extra revenues, and I believe those might be a bit more flexible than the parts that are already locked in.
Okay, staying in Tucson, but switching over to the police department, a little bit of a shakeup. Chief Chad Kasmar retiring or kind of moving out of work, but he's going to be back at work pretty soon as the deputy county administrator overseeing public safety issues. Tim, if you're the chief, why make the move now?
I mean, I didn't expect it. He's 48 years old. He has earned his retirement. He's got 25 years, but he's only 4+ years into a term as chief that seemed kind of limitless in the sense that the council supported him, labor supported him, he had the community's support to a large extent in each case. Obviously, there's certainly some detractors somewhere, but he decided to call it a career in the police department. There's been a lot of rumors that he couldn't deal with the city mayor or council or something in the city government structure. Mm-hmm. When I talked to him, he said, "Nope, that's not it." Basically, it was a personal thing. He'd wanted a job that wasn't taking years off his life and that was allowing him a little more ability to deal with, to be present with his family and that sort of thing.
Okay, Joe, Deputy Chief Monica Prieto takes over, not on an interim basis. She's getting the job. What do we need to know about her and what maybe some of her plans are?
She's a Tucson native. She's been working for the police department and worked her way up from a patrol officer to being the second to Kasmar, and was, appointed by the city manager. So she's been here, she knows the area, and so she's a Tucsonan heart and through. I spent a little time with her today talking about, her next steps and what it was like. And so she's focused on, the same issues that Kasmar has been talking about in the press for the last 2 years.
Well, Paul, one of the things is with the move, what does that leave in terms of holes of things that needed to get accomplished while he was there? How much will Prieto be able to continue to do what he was doing if that was even a thing?
I think my impression is that this is just a very clean handover, actually, really. I mean, while he's stepping out of the job, this isn't somebody being suddenly replaced and there's kind of a national search and there's an interim. No, this is somebody who's long been in this position, who understands the agency. She's actually been there slightly longer than Chad. And so there's just seems like a fairly seamless handover in a lot of ways, which is sort of surprising. I mean, there's sometimes when agencies do this, there's a little bit of a hangover, but you see with TPD, the previous chief, Chris Magnus, who was here for a bit, I mean, he handed over to Kasmar and there was kind of a very quick, no drama changeover, and as when Kasmar went to work for CBP for a little bit.
Yeah.
So, we just see this. I don't think there'll be some big expectation that there's going to be even a sea change in TPD. There's not going to be a change in policies. I think we're going to see the agency do what it's been doing for the last several years under Kasmar and under his predecessor, Magnus.
Tim, quickly, what will his role be now, though, with the sheriff's department?
It's Pima County.
Pima County, excuse me.
Yeah.
What kind of impact could he potentially have there?
Well, it's a complicated situation at the top of the Pima County bureaucracy. Mm-hmm. Jan Lesher has been the county administrator for some years, and is now planning to retire in January next year, 2027. And she has only two deputy county administrators, whereas the full complement is 3. So she wanted to get 3 in before she retires, so that if they want to pull one up, there's not another huge mess at the top of the bureaucracy there. He'll be overseeing not just law, like public defense services and all those departments, justice services, but also tourism and attractions is one, parks and recreation. Okay. He's got the vehicle fleet. So, they basically have a bunch of different departments, and they have redivided them among the 3 different deputy county administrators.
Okay. Right now, it is time for our viewer questions. A reminder, each week you can send in a question to azpm.org/pressroom. You can also comment on our YouTube channel, and we will pull them up and ask the panel one of the questions. So this week's question comes to us from our YouTube channel, and it is: Phoenix got all sorts of new freeways with the 0.5% RTA sales tax up there. You've seen a ton of new infrastructure. We've got the same 2 freeways the federal government built decades ago, and a pointless streetcar. From this commentator, they've decided that they're going to vote no against the RTA Next plan. How common is this sentiment about transit infrastructure here, and anything else stand out from you guys on this question, Nick?
Well, I have heard I haven't been in Tucson too long, but I have heard the complaint about there not being a crosstown freeway.
Yeah.
As far as I understand, you'd have to tear up several neighborhoods to get that done at this point, which is why a lot of these urban freeways were built back in the 60s when there was more public support for tearing up neighborhoods and sending people off to live somewhere else. I don't know if anyone else is.
I mean, that is it. This is a bridge we didn't cross back in the 80s, and it's going to be hard to ever do the freeway thing again. As to the streetcar, I would completely disagree with the viewer's point. It's been a great success. I mean, you'd go on it any day, and you'll find crowds of people. Yes, mostly used by university students, but amply, like really a lot.
But that streetcar also led to a lot of economic revival downtown and 4th Avenue and University that wasn't seen prior to that. There was a lot of businesses there and it's construction that happened because of it, because of the streetcar. And so maybe it failed for this person, but at the same time, it is used by and has generated billions in economic development.
Paul?
Yeah, I think fundamentally, I mean, downtown changed radically after the streetcar. I mean, downtown was there was not much downtown before the streetcar was built. Let's put it that way. And now there's dozens of businesses. And there's also the apartment buildings. There's also the complexes. I mean, all the way down to the Mercado San Agustin and the annex. There's a whole kind of cultural connection and nexus that's happening there. Is the streetcar could it be bigger? Could it be more connected? Yes, certainly. I think that would be one of the questions for a future RTA Next is what do we do? Do we make the streetcar a bigger, more complex system, more akin to other cities that have streetcars? I think that would be something that people really would want. As for why Tucson doesn't have a huge freeway system, I mean, first, Phoenix has a massive number of people, way more investment, way more money. So part of that was that there's been a long time of infrastructure, of building all this kind of infrastructure into Phoenix, building all these freeway systems that just Tucson hasn't been able to do because we just don't have the funds. There is a radically different amount of, 5% of $1 million versus 5% of $1 billion is a radically different amount of money, right? So I think that's in part, and Tucson hasn't wanted a crosstown freeway. Where are you going to build it? I mean, there's a fundamental problem, though I will say you see ways of getting around this town using like Aviation Highway. There are kind of sort of pseudo highways that you can use, River to a point, Skyline to a part. I mean, you can go pretty far around this town and maneuver, but you just can't take a full-blown freeway.
Okay. Joe Ferguson, Tim Steller, Paul Ingram, Nick Rommel, thank you all for being with us today. And thank you all at home for watching and listening. I'm David Lee in the press room. We'll see you next week. Thanks for watching The Press Room here on YouTube. If you have a question about something we talked about, please leave a comment below. And for more Press Room, click right here.